Sir, can you hear me?
Dead Harley, shaking. His boots lay split open in the snow.
Oh my God.
Help! Somebody, please! My feet, I can't feel anything. I can't feel anything.
Boy, I can't move. I'm here, I got you. Don't move.
Silas pulled off his only shoes. White Converse,
I can't just walk
yellow,
away.
his dead mama's handwriting still on the sole. He knelt on the ice, slid them
I hope
onto
you
the old
understand.
man's frozen feet.
Kid, those are yours. I'm fine. Stay alive. Kid, why would you do this? Because you needed them more.
He stood barefoot in a Detroit blizzard, 20 years old, homeless. What he didn't know was that this good deed of his would change his life forever.
This is the story of Silas Ashford, and the night one pair of shoes changed everything.
But before that blizzard, before the boots and the Harley and the 2000 engines, there was just a boy trying to survive another winter in Detroit. Silas Ashford had been homeless for 3 years. His mother, Denise, died when he was 17. Lung disease, the kind that starts with a cough and ends with a hospital bed no one can afford. She worked 2 jobs, night shift at a nursing home, mornings at a laundromat, and still couldn't keep up with the bills. When she passed, the landlord changed the locks before the funeral flowers wilted. Silas had no father. Never did. The man left before Silas could walk, and Denise never spoke his name. She raised Silas alone in a 2-room apartment on the east side of Detroit, and she did it with a stubbornness that bordered on faith. Every morning, no matter how tired she was, she made him oatmeal and told him the same thing. "Walk tall, baby." She wrote it inside his shoes, too. A pair of white Converse she bought him for his 16th birthday, the last birthday she was alive for. Black Sharpie on the inner sole, her handwriting slanting left the way it always did. "Walk tall, baby." Like a prayer stitched into canvas. After she died, Silas bounced. A cousin's couch for 2 months, a church basement for 6 weeks, then the shelters. Detroit had 11 of them, and Silas had slept in 9. The one he stayed at now, Grace Harbor, on the corner of Gratiot and Russell, was the only one that didn't make him feel like cargo. Grace Harbor was a converted warehouse. Fluorescent lights, cement floors, 50 beds lined in rows. The heat worked most nights. The showers ran warm if you got there before 6. The staff, 2 full-timers and a rotating cast of volunteers, did what they could with what they had, which was almost nothing. Silas slept on a top bunk near the back wall. Below him was Caleb, a 9-year-old boy with no parents and a stutter that got worse when he was scared. Caleb had arrived at Grace Harbor 4 months ago, dropped off by a social worker who promised she'd be back. She never came back. Silas looked out for him, made sure Caleb ate first, made sure no one took his blanket. At night, when Caleb couldn't sleep, Silas would lean over the bunk rail and read to him from whatever book he'd borrowed from the public library that week. Caleb liked the ones about space. During the day, Silas worked. Not a real job. No one hires a kid with no address, no ID, and no phone number. But Eleanor Bennett did. Mrs. Bennett was 71 years old and ran a laundromat on Chain Street called Suds and Folds. It had been there for 40 years. So had she. The machines were older than Silas. Half of them broke down once a week, and the parking lot had more potholes than pavement. But Mrs. Bennett kept the place open because the neighborhood needed it, and because she was too stubborn to quit. She paid Silas $30 a day to haul bags, mop floors, fix machines, and fold whatever the regulars left behind. In return, she gave him lunch, usually a ham sandwich and a thermos of soup, and let him sit in the back room after hours to read his library books. Silas read about engines, motorcycle engines specifically. He had taught himself the difference between a V-twin and an inline-4 by the time he was 18. He could identify a Harley-Davidson by the sound of its exhaust from 2 blocks away, that low, uneven rumble, like a heartbeat with a limp. He wanted to be a mechanic. Not cars, bikes. He wanted to open a small garage someday, the kind of place where people brought machines that everyone else said were dead, and he'd bring them back. It was a stupid dream for a homeless kid. He knew that. But he kept it anyway, the way he kept his mother's shoes. Not because it made sense, but because letting go of it would mean letting go of everything. Every night, before lights out at Grace Harbor, Silas sat on his bunk and unlaced those Converse. He'd turn the left shoe over and read the words on the sole. Walk tall, baby. The ink was fading now, 3 years of rain and pavement wearing it thin, but he could still read it. He could still hear her voice when he did. He'd put the shoes under his pillow, not on the floor, never on the floor, because things on the floor disappeared at shelters. And he'd lie back and stare at the ceiling. Some nights, the rumble of a motorcycle would pass outside on Gratiot Avenue. The engine note would rise and fall and fade into the dark. Silas would close his eyes and see himself on that road, riding somewhere warm, riding somewhere his. He didn't know that road was about to find him first. The blizzard came on a Thursday in January, and it came fast. The forecast had said flurries. By 4 in the afternoon, the sky had turned the color of wet concrete, and the wind was ripping down Gratiot Avenue at 40 miles an hour. Snow fell sideways. The temperature dropped to -18 Celsius in under 2 hours, and the city shut down the way Detroit always does in weather like that, suddenly and without apology. Silas had stayed late at Suds and Folds. One of the dryers had jammed again, and Mrs. Bennett couldn't close up until it was fixed. He spent 40 minutes pulling a knotted bedsheet out of the drum, burning his knuckles on the hot metal, while Mrs. Bennett stood behind him giving directions he didn't need. "Turn it the other way, baby." "I got it, Mrs. B." "You're going to strip the belt." "I already fixed the belt." She handed him his $30 and a thermos of chicken soup. Then she looked out the window and frowned. "You walking back in this?" "It's only 12 blocks. 12 blocks in a blizzard is 12 miles, Silas." He zipped up his jacket. A thin windbreaker, gray, 2 sizes too big, donated by someone who'd probably replaced it with something better, and stepped outside. The wind hit him like a wall. Snow was already ankle-deep on the sidewalk, and the streetlights had that hazy glow that meant the air was more ice than air. Grace Harbor closed its doors at 9:30. No exceptions. If you weren't inside by then, you slept outside. It was 7:50. 12 blocks. 40 minutes if he walked fast. He walked fast. By block 6, he couldn't feel his ears. By block 8, his fingers had stopped responding. The windbreaker was a joke. The cold went through it like it wasn't there. He tucked his chin into his collar and kept moving, one foot in front of the other, his Converse soaking through with every step. He was passing under the Chain Street overpass when he heard it, a sound he knew better than almost any other. The cough and choke of a motorcycle engine trying to turn over and failing. Then silence. Then the sound again, weaker this time. Then nothing. Silas stopped, looked into the shadows under the overpass. A motorcycle sat tilted on its kickstand, half buried in drifting snow. A Harley-Davidson Road King. Silas could tell by the shape of the fairing, even in the dark. Chrome pipes, wide handlebars. The kind of bike that cost more than most people's cars. Next to it, a man sat on the frozen ground with his back against the concrete wall. He was old, 70, maybe older. White hair, white stubble, deep lines carved into a face that looked like it had spent 50 years in the wind. He wore a leather vest over a flannel shirt, and his arms were wrapped around his own body, hugging himself against the cold. His boots sat beside him, or what was left of them. The leather had split along both soles, torn open from the inside. One boot had lost its heel entirely. They were the boots of a man who had ridden a long way and hadn't planned on walking. The man was shaking. Not shivering, shaking. The deep, involuntary kind that means the body is losing a fight it can't afford to lose. His lips were blue-gray. His fingers were curled into claws against his chest. When he breathed, the air came out in short, ragged bursts that didn't sound like breathing. Silas looked at the man, looked at the dead motorcycle, looked at the ruined boots, Looked at his phone. No, he didn't have a phone. Looked at the street. Empty. Not a car, not a person, not a light on in any window. He looked at his watch. 8:12. 18 minutes to get to Grace Harbor. If he walked away now, he'd make it. If he stopped, he wouldn't. The old man opened his eyes. They were pale blue, watery, and they found Silas in the dark with the desperate focus of someone who knows they're running out of time. "Please." His voice was barely there. "Please, son. I can't get up." Silas looked down the empty street one more time. 12 blocks to warmth, 12 blocks to a bed, 12 blocks to survival. He turned around and walked toward the old man. What he didn't see, what he couldn't see in the dark and the snow, was the patch on the back of the old man's vest. A silver eagle with spread wings, and below it, 3 words stitched in white thread. Iron Eagles MC. And below that, in smaller letters, Founding President. Silas crouched in front of the old man and put his hand on his shoulder. The flannel was soaked through. Underneath, the man's body was trembling so hard it felt like a motor misfiring. "Sir, hey, look at me. What's your name?" The old man's eyes drifted. It took him a moment to focus. "Hank." His voice came out in pieces. "Hank Dawson." "Okay, Hank. I'm Silas. How long you been out here?" I stopped to check the engine. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. I don't know." An hour. In -18. Silas looked at the man's hands, curled into white knots, the knuckles swollen. Then he looked at his feet. The ruined boots had been pulled off and tossed aside. Hank's socks were soaked black with snowmelt, and through the thin cotton, Silas could see the skin, grayish, waxy, the color of frostbite settling in. "Can you stand?" "I tried. I can't. My legs won't." "Okay, it's okay. Don't move." Silas unzipped his windbreaker and draped it over Hank's shoulders, tucking it under his arms the way his mother used to tuck blankets around him when he was sick. The cold hit Silas's chest like a punch. He was down to a thermal shirt now, thin and fraying at the seams. Hank tried to push the jacket back. "No. Kid, you'll freeze." "I'm fine. You're not." Silas looked at Hank's feet again. The socks were useless. The boots were destroyed, and the man's toes were disappearing. Not figuratively, but literally, the color draining out of them like something being erased. Then Silas looked down at his own feet, his Converse. White canvas turned yellow-gray, laces fraying, rubber sole worn smooth on the left heel from the way he dragged his foot when he was tired. His mother's handwriting on the inside, 3 words in fading Sharpie. "Walk tall, baby." He didn't think about it the way people think about decisions. There was no weighing, no calculation. He just looked at the old man's gray feet and his own shoes and understood, in the quiet way you understand gravity, that there was only one thing to do. He sat down on the frozen ground. The ice burned through his jeans instantly. He unlaced the left shoe first, then the right. He pulled them off, and the cold wrapped around his feet like teeth. "What are you doing?" Hank's eyes widened. "Hold still." Silas lifted Hank's left foot. It was heavy and stiff, the ankle barely bending. He peeled the soaked sock down gently, the way you handle something that might break. The skin underneath was hard and pale. Silas slid the Converse on, working the opening wide with his thumbs, easing it over the swollen toes. He laced it up, not tight, but firm, enough to hold. Then the right foot. Same thing. Peel, ease, lace. His fingers were shaking now, not from emotion, but from cold. The tips had gone numb 3 minutes ago, and he was working by feel and memory. When he finished, he sat back on his heels and looked at the old man wearing his dead mother's shoes. Hank stared down at his own feet, then at Silas's bare feet on the ice, already turning red, already starting to swell. "Kid," Hank's voice cracked, "those are your only pair." "I know." "Why would you?" "Because you needed them." Hank opened his mouth, closed it. A tear slid down the creased skin of his cheek and froze halfway.
Okay, but 20 years old, homeless, barefoot in a blizzard, and he just gave a stranger his dead mama's shoes. Without thinking twice. Now he's sleeping on cardboard tonight because he stopped to save a life. This kid is actually insane, in the best way possible.
Silas stood up. The ground burned under his bare soles. Every step felt like walking on broken glass, but the pain meant his nerves were still working, and that meant he still had time.
I'm going to get help. There's a gas station about 6 blocks east. Stay here. Don't fall asleep. You hear me, Hank? Don't fall asleep. Silas. I'll be back. He ran. Barefoot on packed snow and black ice, arms wrapped around his own body, thermal shirt soaked with sweat and freezing against his skin. 6 blocks. He counted them in his head the way he counted everything. 1 foot, then the other, then again, then again.
The gas station was closed. The lights were off. But the payphone on the wall still worked. He picked up the receiver with fingers that could barely close around it and dialed 911. I need an ambulance. There's an old man under the Chain Street overpass. Hypothermia. He can't walk. Please hurry. The dispatcher asked his name. He gave it. She asked him to stay on the line. He hung up because his hands couldn't hold the phone anymore. He walked back to the overpass. Slower now. The pain in his feet had shifted. From sharp to dull to something that felt like nothing at all, and that scared him more than the pain had. When he got back, Hank was still awake. Barely. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow, but he was awake. Silas. Hank reached out and grabbed his wrist. The grip was weak, but deliberate. Sit down, next to me. Silas sat. Hank pulled the windbreaker off his own shoulders and draped it back over Silas. Neither of them spoke. They sat together under the overpass, 2 strangers sharing one thin jacket, waiting for sirens. The ambulance came 11 minutes later, red and blue lights cutting through the white. 2 paramedics in heavy coats jumped out and ran toward them. They wrapped Hank in thermal blankets, checked his vitals, loaded him onto a stretcher. One of the paramedics looked at Silas, barefoot, shaking, lips dry and cracked. Son, where are your shoes? Silas nodded toward Hank's feet on the stretcher. The paramedic looked down. White Converse, yellowed, laced tight on an old man's feet. He looked back at Silas and didn't say anything for a long moment. You want to ride with him? I can't. I have to get back to the shelter. Son, you need medical. I'm fine. Just take care of him. Hank grabbed Silas's hand as the stretcher slid into the ambulance. His eyes were clearer now, sharper, like the warmth was bringing something back. What's your name again? Silas. Silas. I won't forget. I swear to God, I won't forget. The doors closed. The ambulance pulled away, lights spinning, siren fading into the storm. Silas stood alone under the overpass, bare feet on frozen concrete. No jacket, no shoes. 9:36 on the shelter clock. Grace Harbor had closed 6 minutes ago. He found a heating vent behind a boarded-up restaurant 2 blocks south. Warm air hissed through the grate in thin, uneven bursts. He pulled 3 flattened cardboard boxes from a dumpster, laid 2 on the ground, and held the third over his body like a blanket. He curled up on the cardboard, tucked his feet under his legs, and closed his eyes. The last thing he heard before sleep was the wind, and somewhere far away, the low rumble of a motorcycle engine heading somewhere warm. The shelter staff found Silas the next morning. He was curled on the cardboard behind the boarded-up restaurant, his feet tucked under his thighs, frost lining the edges of his thermal shirt. A volunteer named Greg spotted him during the early sweep, the one they did every morning after bad nights, checking doorways and alleys for anyone who didn't make it inside. Silas! Hey! Silas! He didn't respond at first. Greg shook his shoulder, and Silas opened his eyes slowly, like someone surfacing from deep water. His lips were cracked. His feet were swollen and red, blistered along the toes, the skin raw where the ice had pressed through the cardboard. They brought him inside, wrapped his feet in warm towels. Not hot, the nurse said, never hot on frostbitten skin. Gave him dry socks, a bowl of oatmeal, and a pair of oversized rubber sandals someone had left in the donation bin. Silas ate the oatmeal without speaking. He looked at the sandals like they were a foreign object. Mrs. Bennett showed up at noon. She'd heard from Greg, who'd told the day manager, who'd called her because everyone at Grace Harbor knew that Eleanor Bennett was the closest thing Silas had to family. She sat down across from him in the common room, arms folded, and looked at his feet in those rubber sandals. "Tell me you didn't." Silas didn't answer. "Silas Ashford, tell me you did not give away your mama's shoes." There was an old man. His boots were torn apart. He couldn't feel his feet. "And what about your feet?" "I'm fine, Mrs. B." "You are not fine. You spent the night on cardboard in 18 below. You could have lost your toes. You could have—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. She pressed her hand against her mouth and held it there for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "Your mama would have done the same damn thing." Silas looked up. "That's what makes me so mad about it." She brought him a pair of her grandson's old sneakers that afternoon. Navy blue, half a size too big, the tread worn flat. Silas put them on and said thank you 3 times, which was twice more than he usually said anything. Across the city, at Henry Ford Hospital, Hank Dawson opened his eyes. The room was warm. White walls, beeping monitors, a thin blanket pulled to his chest. His hands were bandaged. An IV dripped into his left arm. A nurse was adjusting his oxygen when he spoke. "The boy." The nurse looked at him. "Sir?" "There was a boy, last night, under the overpass. He gave me his shoes. I don't have information about— His name is Silas. Young, black kid, 20 maybe. He was barefoot when the ambulance came." Hank's voice was hoarse but urgent. "I need to find him." The nurse wrote it down and said she'd ask. She didn't ask. Hospitals don't track the people who call ambulances and walk away. But Hank didn't forget. He looked down at the foot of his bed, where the hospital staff had placed his belongings in a clear plastic bag. Inside, his wallet, his keys, his phone, and a pair of white Converse. Yellowed, fraying, left shoe slightly more worn than the right. He reached for them. His bandaged hands fumbled with the bag, but he got it open. He pulled out the left shoe and turned it over. There, on the inner sole, in black Sharpie that had faded but not disappeared, "Walk tall, baby." Hank held the shoe against his chest. He closed his eyes. Then he picked up his phone with stiff, bandaged fingers and called his son. "Tyler." "Dad, Jesus, are you okay? I've been calling all night." "Listen to me. A boy saved my life last night. He put his shoes on my feet and ran barefoot through a blizzard to call an ambulance. His name is Silas. I need you to find him." Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll find him, Dad." "Tyler. He gave me his only shoes. The only thing he had from his mother. He knelt in the snow and put them on my feet." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'll find him." Tyler Dawson was 45 years old, built like a refrigerator, and had been riding motorcycles since he was 14. He was vice president of the Iron Eagles MC Detroit chapter, a position he'd earned, not inherited, though his father had founded the club 43 years ago in a garage on Michigan Avenue with 6 riders and a handshake. The Iron Eagles weren't outlaws. They were tradesmen, veterans, mechanics, truck drivers, men and women who rode because riding was the one thing that still felt free. They did charity runs for children's hospitals. They escorted funeral processions for fallen soldiers. They showed up. That was the whole code. When one of yours needed something, you showed up. And Hank Dawson, their founding president, the man who'd built the whole thing from a garage, had just been saved by a homeless kid who put shoes on his feet in a blizzard. Tyler started making calls that afternoon. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee going cold beside him, and worked through the list. 11 shelters in Detroit. One by one. "I'm looking for a young man named Silas, 20 years old, black. He would have come in last night or this morning with no shoes. Grace Harbor was the seventh call. The day manager, Patricia, paused when she heard the description. Silas Ashford? That's him. He came in this morning with frostbite on both feet, blistered, swollen. Wouldn't tell anyone what happened. She paused again. What's this about? Tyler told her. The overpass, the dead engine, the boots split open, the boy kneeling on the ice, lacing his own shoes onto a stranger's frozen feet. Patricia was quiet for a long time. Tyler could hear the hum of the shelter's heating system through the phone. That boy gave away his mama's shoes? Yes, ma'am. Lord have mercy. Tyler asked her to keep Silas there in the morning. Patricia said she'd try but couldn't promise. Silas left at 7 every day for work. That night, Tyler sat in his living room, the glow of his laptop the only light. He opened the Iron Eagle's private Facebook group. 2,043 members. Every chapter from Michigan to Montana. He typed slowly, pressing each key with the weight of what he was writing. Brothers and sisters, most of you know my father, Hank Dawson, founding president, Chapter 1. Last night his bike died in the blizzard. He was stranded under the Chain Street overpass with hypothermia. A 20-year-old homeless kid named Silas found him. Silas took off his only shoes, the last thing his dead mother gave him, and put them on my father's feet. Then he ran barefoot through the storm to call 911. He missed his shelter curfew. He slept on cardboard. I'm finding him tomorrow. He hit send at 11:14 p.m. The screen flickered once, then went still. By sunrise, the post had reached every chapter in 38 states. 2,000 writers had read it, and the comments section had turned into something Tyler hadn't expected. Not sympathy, not outrage, but a plan. Tyler arrived at Grace Harbor the next morning at 6:45. He parked his truck across the street and walked in through the front entrance wearing a plain gray hoodie, jeans, and work boots. No vest, no patches, no Iron Eagle's insignia. He looked like any other working man on a cold Tuesday. The shelter smelled like bleach and instant coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A line of cots stretched down the main hall, half of them already empty. People who had somewhere to go had already gone. A few stayed behind, sitting on the edges of their beds, staring at nothing in particular the way people do when they have nowhere else to stare. Patricia met him by the front desk. She was a short woman with reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. He's in the dining area, eating breakfast before he heads out. Does he know I'm coming? No, I didn't want him to run. He'd run? Silas doesn't like attention. He doesn't like people making a fuss. He helps someone and moves on. That's just who he is. Tyler nodded. He'd known men like that in the club. The ones who'd ride 300 miles in the rain to help a brother change a tire, and then leave before anyone could say thank you. Those were always the best ones. He walked into the dining area. It was a long room with folding tables and plastic chairs, a serving counter along one wall, and windows so dirty the daylight came through yellow. Maybe 20 people sat scattered around the tables, eating from paper plates. Silas was at a table near the back. He wore a faded black hoodie, the navy sneakers Mrs. Bennett had given him, and a pair of gray sweatpants with a hole in the left knee. His feet were propped on the chair across from him, still swollen, still bandaged under the socks. In front of him, a plate with scrambled eggs and toast. Next to him, Caleb, eating a bowl of cereal and talking about something that involved a lot of hand gestures. Tyler watched them for a moment. The young man listening to the boy, nodding, tearing his toast in half and putting the bigger piece on Caleb's plate without saying anything. Tyler pulled out a chair and sat down across from Silas. Silas Ashford? Silas looked up. His eyes were careful, the kind of careful that comes from years of unexpected bad news. Who's asking? My name is Tyler Dawson. I think you met my father 2 nights ago. Something shifted behind Silas's eyes. Not recognition exactly, but memory. The overpass, the shaking hands, the pale blue eyes. The old man, Hank. That's him. Silas straightened in his chair. His hands went flat on the table. Is he okay? He's okay, because of you. Silas exhaled. A long, slow breath, the kind you let out when you've been holding something without knowing you were holding it. I didn't do much. You gave him your shoes, in a blizzard, and ran barefoot to call an ambulance. He needed them. Tyler leaned forward. Silas, my father hasn't stopped talking about you since he woke up. Not for 1 minute. And he wants to see you again. Silas shook his head. He doesn't owe me anything. I didn't do it I just saw him sitting there, and I couldn't walk away, that's all. I know. And that's exactly why I'm here. Tyler reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened a video and turned the screen towards Silas. Hank Dawson appeared on the screen, propped up in his hospital bed. His hands were still bandaged. The IV was still in his arm. But his eyes were clear, sharp and steady and full of something that looked like purpose. On the nightstand beside him sat a pair of white Converse, yellowed, fraying, carefully placed, laces tucked inside, like something preserved. Silas. Hank's voice was rough but strong. I don't know if you know what you did for me, but I'm going to tell you. You saved my life. Not just my feet, my life. The doctors said another 30 minutes out there and I would have gone into cardiac arrest. Silas stared at the screen. His jaw tightened. I'm the founding president of the Iron Eagles Motorcycle Club. We have chapters in 38 states. Over 2,000 members. Every single one of them knows your name now, Silas. Every one of them knows what you did. Silas's hand came up to his mouth. Caleb stopped eating and looked at him. You gave a stranger the only thing you had left from your mother. And you didn't ask for anything. You didn't even stay to hear a thank you. Hank paused. His voice dropped lower. I've been riding 50 years. I've met a lot of brave men. But I have never met anyone like you. The video ended. The screen went dark. Silas sat perfectly still. His hand was still over his mouth. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying the way most people cry. It was quieter than that, deeper. Like something inside him that had been locked shut for a very long time had cracked open, and he didn't know what to do with what was pouring out. Caleb put his small hand on Silas's arm. Silas, you okay? Silas nodded. He couldn't speak. Tyler gave him time. He didn't push. He didn't talk. He just sat there, the way you sit with someone who needs a minute to understand that something in their life has just changed and is never going back. When Silas finally looked up, his eyes were red, but his voice was steady. He kept my mama's shoes. He won't let anyone touch them. Silas pressed both hands flat on the table, took a breath, let it out. What happens now? And Tyler Dawson smiled for the first time that morning. Now we talk about your future. Tyler didn't make a speech. He didn't pull out a checkbook or hand over an envelope. He just talked, straight and simple, the way men in the club talked when something mattered. Silas, the Iron Eagles want to help you. We want to get you out of this shelter, set you up with a place to live, pay for trade school, whatever program you want, clothes, supplies, food, all of it. No strings, no payback, just a hand up from people who believe in what you did. Silas listened. His face didn't change. His hands stayed flat on the table. When Tyler finished, Silas didn't say thank you. He didn't say yes. He didn't say anything for a long time. Caleb was still sitting next to him, spooning cereal into his mouth, watching Tyler the way children watch strangers, with careful, unblinking attention. What about them? Silas said. Tyler blinked. What? The people here. What about them? Tyler looked around the dining area. The folding tables, the paper plates, the man in the corner with a cough that hadn't stopped in 3 months, the woman by the window braiding her daughter's hair with hands that were shaking from the cold because the heating vent above her table hadn't worked since November. What about Caleb? Silas put his hand on the boy's shoulder. He's 9. He doesn't have parents. He doesn't have a winter coat. He sleeps in a sweatshirt and 2 blankets, and he still wakes up shivering every night. Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it.
There's a woman here named Sandra. She's got 2 kids, 5 and 7. She works part-time at a gas station and still can't afford a deposit on an apartment. There's a man named Curtis who lost his leg in Afghanistan and can't get the VA to return his calls. There's a kid, maybe 16, who showed up last week with a black eye and a garbage bag full of clothes and hasn't spoken a word to anyone. Silas looked Tyler in the eyes. You want to help me? Help them. Tyler sat back in his chair. He ran his hand over his face. He'd come prepared for a lot of things. Gratitude, suspicion, maybe anger. He hadn't prepared for this. Silas, the offer is for you. I know, and I'm telling you I don't want it. Not just for me. You'd turn it down? I'd turn it down.
The room was quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. Caleb looked up at Silas with an expression that was too old for a 9-year-old. The look of someone who understood what was happening, even if he couldn't name it. Tyler pulled out his phone and called Hank. The conversation was short. Tyler explained what Silas had said. There was a pause on the other end. The kind of pause that happens when an old man hears something that confirms what he already suspected about the world. That goodness doesn't run out. That some people really are built different. Then Hank spoke. His voice was thick. Then we help every last one of them. Tyler hung up and looked at Silas. My father says yes. Yes to what? All of it. The whole shelter. We're going to fix this place up. Get winter supplies in here and set up programs for everyone. GED prep, job training, housing assistance. For you, for Caleb, for Sandra and Curtis, and the kid with the garbage bag. All of them. Silas didn't move. He sat there with his hand still on Caleb's shoulder, and Tyler watched something cross his face that he couldn't quite read. Not relief exactly, not joy, but something raw. The look of a man who had spent 3 years asking for nothing and had just been told that asking for others counted too. How? Silas said quietly. The club. We have over 2,000 members. Mechanics, electricians, contractors, nurses, teachers. We have people who can build things, and people who can fund things, and people who can run things. We've done charity rides for years. This one's just going to be bigger. Tyler reached into his jacket and pulled out something Silas hadn't expected. A leather vest. Black. Clean. Unpatched except for one piece of embroidery on the left breast. A silver eagle with spread wings and the words, Iron Eagles, M.C., honorary member, stitched beneath it. This is from my father. He wanted you to have it. Silas touched the leather, ran his fingers over the stitching. The material was smooth and heavy, nothing like the thin windbreaker he'd been wearing. He said you're the youngest honorary member in the history of the club. Tyler paused. And the only one who earned the patch barefoot. Silas almost smiled. Not quite, but close. The corner of his mouth lifted, and his eyes softened in a way that made him look, for the first time since Tyler had sat down, like a 20-year-old instead of someone much older. One more thing, Tyler said. We're going to call the foundation Walk Tall. Silas's hand stopped moving on the vest. Your mother's words, on the shoe. Walk tall, baby. Tyler's voice was steady, but gentle. That's the name, if you'll let us use it. Silas pressed his lips together. He looked down at the table. His fingers curled around the edge of the vest, gripping it the way you grip something when you're trying not to fall apart. Caleb leaned into his side. Silas? Is this a good thing? Silas put his arm around him, pulled him close, nodded. Yeah, little man, this is a good thing. And for the first time in 3 years, Silas Ashford believed something might actually change. The ride was scheduled for the last Saturday in February. Tyler posted the details on a Monday. By Wednesday, every chapter in the country had confirmed. They called it the Ride for Silas. Riders came from Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. A group of 14 rode down from Montana, 3 days on frozen highways, sleeping in motel parking lots. A woman named Donna Wheeler rode solo from Savannah, Georgia, 1,300 miles. She told a reporter she'd read Tyler's post and couldn't stop thinking about the shoes. "A boy who gives away his mama's shoes," she said. "That's not something you scroll past." They gathered on 8 Mile Road at 8 in the morning. 2,011 motorcycles, counted by the Detroit police escort. Harleys, Indians, Triumphs, chrome catching sunlight, engines rumbling so deep you felt it in your teeth. Hank Dawson led the formation. Released from the hospital 9 days earlier, hands still stiff, but he climbed onto his Road King and kicked it to life on the first try. Tyler had rebuilt the engine himself. On Hank's right mirror hung a pair of white Converse, yellowed, fraying, laces knotted around the stem. The ride went south on Gratiot Avenue, past the gas station where Silas had called 911, past the overpass where he'd found Hank, straight to the front door of Grace Harbor. Silas stood outside with Caleb. Patricia had told him something was happening, but not what. He wore the Iron Eagles vest over his black hoodie. Caleb held his hand. The first motorcycle turned the corner. Silas heard it before he saw it, that low, uneven rumble he'd listened to from his bunk for 3 years. Then another engine. Then another. Then a wall of sound that rolled down Gratiot like thunder crawling across the ground. 2,000 motorcycles passed in a single column stretching 3 miles. Riders raised fists. Some revved their engines. Some just nodded, slow and deliberate, a language without words. Silas watched them pass. His hand was shaking, not from cold. Caleb tugged his sleeve. "Silas, are they all here for you?" He couldn't answer. CNN was there, local affiliates from 3 states. A TikTok clip filmed from a rooftop hit 14 million views in 48 hours. The Detroit Free Press ran a front-page headline, "Walk Tall, How One Pair of Shoes Changed a City." The Walk Tall Foundation raised $220,000 in 2 weeks. Corporate sponsors followed. A construction company donated materials. An HVAC contractor fixed the heating at Grace Harbor for free. Within 3 months, the shelter had new beds, working plumbing, a rebuilt kitchen, and a computer lab. The foundation expanded to 4 shelters across Michigan. Sandra got her housing voucher. Curtis finally got his VA appointment. Devin, the 16-year-old with the garbage bag, enrolled in a welding program and spoke his first full sentence to another resident 6 weeks after the ride. Silas started trade school, motorcycle mechanics. His instructor, a retired Harley technician named Walt Crawford, told Tyler after the first month, "That kid strips an engine like he was born inside one." Hank picked Silas up every Sunday for a ride. Down along the river, past the old factories, through neighborhoods half empty and half alive. Hank told stories about the early Eagles, the garage, the first ride, the first charter. Silas listened the way he always did, quiet and close. And on the mirror of Hank's bike, the Converse still swung with every turn. 1 year later, January again, another blizzard warning across southeast Michigan. The sky had turned that same wet concrete gray, and the wind was picking up along Gratiot Avenue, pushing loose snow across the pavement in low, hissing sheets. Silas was 21 now. He had an apartment, small, 1 bedroom, 6 blocks from Grace Harbor. The Walk Tall Foundation had helped with the deposit. He'd furnished it with second-hand things, a couch from a yard sale, a kitchen table Mrs. Bennett insisted he take from her storage room, a bookshelf he'd built himself from scrap wood at the trade school workshop. On the bookshelf, next to his mechanics textbooks and a framed photo of his mother, sat a single item in a glass case. A pair of white Converse. Yellowed. Fraying. Hank had returned them to him on Christmas morning, cleaned and preserved, the Sharpie on the inner sole touched up by a leatherworker in the club so the words would never fade again. "Walk tall, baby." Silas was driving home from the shop, Crawford's cycle repair, where Walt had hired him full-time after he finished his certification in 10 months instead of 12. He drove a used pickup truck that Tyler had found for him at auction. Nothing fancy. Ran well. The Iron Eagle's patch hung from the rearview mirror. The snow was coming down hard when he passed the bus stop on Russell Street. He almost didn't see her. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, sitting on the bench with her knees pulled to her chest. No gloves, no hat. Her jacket was zipped to her chin, but it was thin, the kind of jacket that looks warm in a store and fails in the first real cold. Silas pulled over, got out, walked to the bench. The girl looked up at him with wide brown eyes. She was shivering, her fingers red and curled into her sleeves. "Where's your ride?" Silas asked. "My mom's bus is late. She said wait here." Silas looked at the girl's hands. Then he pulled off his gloves, black leather, lined with fleece, a gift from Hank, and held them out. "Here, put these on." "Those are yours." "You need them more right now." The girl looked at him, then at the gloves. She slid her small hands inside them, and her fingers disappeared into the leather. She wiggled them and almost smiled. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Silas walked back to his truck. His bare hands stung in the wind. He sat in the driver's seat and looked at the rearview mirror, the Iron Eagle's patch turning slowly on its thread. He pulled out of the bus stop and drove toward home. The snow fell heavy and white against the windshield. Somewhere behind him, a little girl sat on a bench wearing gloves that were 4 sizes too big, warm for the first time in hours. And somewhere above all of it, past the snow, past the steel sky, past everything Detroit could throw at the people who lived there, Denise Ashford's voice carried on, quiet and steady, the way a mother's voice always does. "Walk tall, baby."
Look, everyone says hold on to what you got, but this kid had nothing and still gave everything. His mama's shoes, off his feet, in a blizzard, for a stranger. No clout, no cameras, no reason, just pure heart. If Silas can do that, what's our excuse?
What would you have done that night under the overpass? Would you have kept walking, or would you have stopped? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story made you feel something you weren't expecting, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. #WalkTall. #RideForSilas. #KindnessWins.